The views expressed in the following show are of the host, the guest, and the callers. The content of the following show, its accuracy, authenticity, and the ramifications of the use or application of said content is the responsibility of those speaking and listening, not the broadcast medium.
All right, we are back and we are live. Feet to the Fire. Radio, now video. I'm your host, James Arthur Yanchik, the Black Knight of Talk Radio. I should get that clip out. I was going to do it last week and I forgot. Well, here we are. I'm not going to comment too much in the news. It's up there. I mean, there's a million people doing it. So I do post stuff on the Facebook and now on Minds.com. Minds.com is James Arthur Jancic or Yancic. No spaces. And then, of course, Facebook is James A. Jancic with dots in between the James A. and Jancic. I guess you could probably search on there and it'll get it on. All the information is, I think it's down here somewhere, scrolling across. Today I wanted to talk about a prayer meditation. A lot of the stuff I've been talking about in other shows, shows. It's funny using that word. Let me go to this. We had Prescience, which would be pre-science, which is like working with getting advice or finding a pathway into the future, which was last week. Talked about internet stuff the day before, about how the week before, and I put on an audio show about the roll the cash and coming crash. Did a little promo thing, intro about the show, which I put up. And then biblical eternity, what is hell, what is the will of God. You know, I've been doing this stuff, kind of putting out my approach, what I've determined. Make a long story short, probably should do a video on or audio, whatever, on this, so it can be referenced. But I went through being in various sects, and at one point in my life having a crucial emotional situation going on. Several things happened at once, and I had like a mini, I went to work and everything's fine, but I had like a mini personal, maybe it's a paradigm crisis, might be a better word than a breakdown, because there's some, if I'm ever going for Supreme Court now, they're going to say that I had a nervous breakdown. Anyway, so, I had to reassemble, the bottom line is I had to reassemble my worldview, my paradigm from scratch. And that's when I adopted the principles of lack of contradiction, which eventually morphed into doing the show, radio, show, now video, whatever. And so I have gone through the Bible in Greek and Hebrew words as so led. I guess that's where the prescience came in. Words would be kind of highlighted. I go, hey, I got to check that out, and then they would learn stuff. I've put together my own personal, theology. A lot of it's going to correspond with a lot of other people. In fact, all of it's probably going to correspond to somebody. Not all of it to one person, but I don't think I hold any kind of aspects that are completely unique. So I'm not the only one. Nor am I claiming to be a prophet of God coming to set things right. But, being a student, if you will, of Socrates, one of my criticisms of him was that he had a great method of breaking down things and exposing the flaws, which is what basically I do, following that. But he didn't really put forth theories of, here's a postulate of what I think could be. And, it could change when more information comes out. He would just constantly tear stuff down. When I'd ask him, well, what's the answer then? He goes, well, how would a poor man like myself, humble, I wouldn't know. I'm an old man. I don't know. In other words, his lesson isn't extreme, but it's a good lesson that the worst thing you can do is think you know something when you don't. So what I've decided to do was put together working, kind of like my own theories on philosophical and theological things and I put it out there, and I can explain why, and I can go through it, and then, if more information comes in, it gets tweaked. I've been doing that for years. And so the stuff that I'm talking about now is been years in the making, and probably when I talk tonight, stuff will come out, and I go, hey, I never thought of that, because when I kind of plug into that zone, a lot of information comes out that I can look up and so forth. So I decided to do a thing about prayer meditation, and it's not going to be like something a pastor or a Sunday school teacher would tell you, because it's not a doctrinal, dogmatic based thing. It's using the words found in the Old and New Testament, along with the concepts of the English words that have been picked for a reason. A lot of times words, when you translate something and you pick a word, you're basically doing a commentary. Even though you're trying to pick the best word, you got to make a choice sometimes, and that's where your own personal bias would come in. And if it's right, it's right. If it isn't, well, somebody else will come along and do it. So what I put together is the idea of prayer meditation. Because one of the things I don't like, and I'm not saying this is wrong at all. Okay, so don't get me wrong. There's a lot of good stuff going on. I don't like praying out loud. I mean, in public. I don't know. To me, when I talk to God, it's extremely personal. And it's like taking a community shower or something. Intellectually you can do it and all, but there's something about it. And it's not that I do any special words or any kind of secret signals or nothing like that. It's just I'd like to do it. Personal thing. When I talk with God, even when I talk out loud, it's a conversation between myself and God. And I would use through my theology, it's a conversation that goes inside, and God's on the other end of the rope, so to speak. And so that is what I also talked about, is building up this infrastructure to be able to communicate with God. And I talked a little bit about it with the Prescience last week, but I thought I would get into the nuts and bolts of this communication process. Now, again, I want to say I don't hear words. Okay, it's not like I hear voices. And I'm not saying if you do, that's bad. And if you do, it could be bad. So it's a personal thing. And I'm just saying that as to dissuade anybody who might be reading into things here. When I talk about conversation, it's what we're going to get into with the prayer meditation. And as you can see by my little graphic over here, to put it in a nutshell, prayer is sending. You're talking to God, if you will, and meditation is being open to receive information back, a message, information, guidance, visions, hunches. It comes, there's a whole bunch of stuff. It can come audibly, it can come visually, it could come intuitively. Some people get an itch, they call it your gut. I think this is the way to go, and it is, But it takes work to develop this, because your fears and your prejudices, peer pressure and all that, is very strong, and it overrides the very subtle communications that go between God and yourself, in yourself to God. And that pathway goes from my human consciousness into my spirit, into the soul, back to God. Now, again, I got a video that I already talked about that gives my infrastructure, if you want to trace that little line or rope that goes back to God, what I think it goes through and what I think happens at death, and how we carry with us. It's very important. I'm getting off topic. It's very important because Jesus, his thrust, which attracted people, was talking about eternal life. That is to say, life after death. There was theology at the time that the resurrection was more of a symbolic, like living through your children, and so that, and a lot of atheistic or liberal Jewish theology thinks this, and others too. Some people think that when you die, you're gone. Atheists are noted for that. When you turn off, all that's here is here. And what Jesus' message is, do you want to live you? Not like some kind of esoteric you, but you. One listening or looking at this, do you want to live after your body stops living? And that essence is taken with Jesus. That was the thrust of his teachings. And so, perhaps that's another day. But I want to go on to the aspect of this prayer and meditation. Now, let me go to my webpage stuff here. The term meditation was interesting because as I look through the various versions of the Bible, there isn't really a word meditation in the New Testament, the English word. And I did find some Greek words that go into that, so we'll get that on the other end. But it is common in the Old Testament, many hits, if you will. And I took one down here just as an example because I also like, my mouth will speak wisdom and the meditation of my heart will be understanding. And I love that verse. I bumped into it. So they're call it synchronicity. I didn't, have this memorized. Is I say the prayer is the mouth speaking to God. And that the meditation is the understanding coming back. I mean, I understand this is not a literal thing here. It says speak wisdom and all that. But I'm liking the idea of the concept of talking to God, prayer, and meditating and waiting for an answer that can come in various forms. And I want to look at that word meditation in the Hebrew. Excuse me. I'm not going to go about try and say it, and so forth, but there is the Hebrew word. I like the idea of the meditation. Meditation, this is what would be the quick translation. Meditation, utterance, musings. I like the word musing because I use the word pondering, which is, I think, wrong. I looked it up in the dictionary, and musing is actually a better phrase. But the part of the meditation, the listening, is going to be in this kind of musing. You're opening yourself up to God, or your higher yourself, your soul, or whatever. I mean, it's a whole kind of a thing there. Your fears and all that are down here too that can interfere. So you're kind of musing. You're kind of pondering. What I like to say is I open my mind and I allow things to bounce around. And usually what will happen is if I get something worth looking into, it'll kind of, I use the word it's highlighted. It doesn't mean that I see like a word that's highlighted. I mean, there is this kind of urge that this particular thing is worth looking into. And I might be one part of it. It might even be the inverse of it. See, that's the funny thing about it. It's not necessarily going to be, it's not linear. I think linear is a curse of the human brain. And it slows us down. And it's also the foundation for scientific reasoning and breaking apart in a linear fashion. And a good example would be to look at a motorcycle, and you can break it down part by part, section by section, but you're tearing apart the whole thing of a motorcycle. So you can't just describe a motorcycle. You have to break it apart into pieces. Well, you got the locomotion, you got the braking, you got all this stuff. And when you meditate on it, I'm just saying, if you're going to meditate on why is my motorcycle not working, I'm going to get to that in a minute because I just did this today. You'll start to think about, maybe, wait a minute, let me check this out, type of thing. In fact, let me just mention it. I do it. I have this hum problem with my turntable, which I haven't had in years past. And it's been driving me nuts. And I hook it up into a preamp, and the preamp goes into the board or whatever. Right? It's a tube preamp. And it's just been driving me crazy. I worked on it all day yesterday, off and on, I should say, and I was getting ready to give up. And I was just bouncing around, and I bumped into a guy who was talking about ground wires on the Technics 1200 turntable, which I have, and how a lot of people think that the ground wire can't go onto the RCA negative and all this hoopla. And he proved by using a connection tester that it's all grounded together. So just this is the whim. On a whim, I disconnected the ground wire from the ground nut that's on the amplifier, preamplifier, and I wrapped it around the negative RCA and plugged it in. boom, complete silence, no buzz whatsoever. What that's telling me is inside the preamp, it wasn't properly grounded from the ground. It went ground out to the ground in your house, but it was not grounded into the circuit, which, some argue that you shouldn't do that, but he proved beyond a shadow of a doubt by taking it, and all these things are grounded into each other, that it's more or less a myth. And I followed it, and boom, it worked. Just like that. No $100, $200 repair bills, sending it, where am I going to get this, time out of my time to drive it there. Boom, answer came like that. Now, granted, I worked on it for a while, but the musing part paid off after a number of times. And this is where we get into the meditation. I probably should have did the prayer first. I'm going to the answer part, but let me get into the. I mentioned there isn't a Greek meditation per se in the New Testament, English word, but if you use the King James, there's one. But if you look at this in the Greek, you have there is a word melateo, melatao. I can't speak English, let alone. And this occurs 3 times in the New Testament. It's translated imagine, meditate, premeditate. And looking at the Thayer's Greek definitions, it's nice I have this on here because I got the book I had to look through using the Greek words. I had to learn to be able to sight read the Greek, not even realizing what the word was, but be able to find it. And that's what I used to do for years. Care for, attend to carefully, practice, to meditate, to devise, to contrive. And see, this is the answer part. This is what you're doing when you're meditating. Strong's to care of, revolve in the mind. I love that. Revolve in the mind. Imagine. And so in this meditative process, sometimes you're throwing stuff up there. And sometimes you throw something up there and it's highlighted. Sometimes stuff just pops in. I mean, how many times people could say, yeah, I was thinking about something, and boom, this idea just popped in my head. Yeah, there you go. You were actually meditating. Now, you didn't do the and all this stuff, right? And I'm not saying that stuff's bad or I'm not making fun of it or whatever, but the idea of a meditation is getting yourself into a frame of mind that is actually kind of outside the frame of mind. It's open to allow stuff. This is where people are, Tesla and others talk about going to another place in their dreams and all that. Still the concept of meditation. For someone to create something, they have to be able to make something that doesn't exist, or at least come up with an idea to improve an existing one. That's outside of the box. That's the creative. But where does that come from? Well, it comes from being educated in your mind. Yeah, of course. The more data your brain has to work with, you have more things to draw from, but it also could be weighing you down. Tradition, well, this is the way they normally do it, and, all this stuff. It's not, you don't throw that out, but you want to kind of take your toe and step outside. So when you think of all these words, you're thinking of the idea of taking care of, revolving in the mind, imagine, practice, to devise, contrive, and then the translations of King James. I have to look these up in the NASB to find out how they did it, because I kind of like that version, but this is good enough, at this point for my whole point. So this is what the idea of meditation is that you can ask God. Actually, I'm really weird how I did this backwards. I should have done the prayer first, but you can ask God. But if you're not listening, now, when we communicate with God, God does, as the picture here. Go back to this picture. This picture over here, God is reaching us. This is taken from God reaching out to Adam from Michelangelo. And as God reaches out and Adam reaches up, this is where, now God, as you can see, if you could see in the major picture, God is really reaching over and Adam is kind of like, help me, And that's just a humility. The problem is a lot of times when someone's arrogant, about things, you're going to miss the stuff because, no, I know better. It's not that way. That's why you had to be open. The person who knows the least and the person who knows the most, when they get together, they all benefit from it. So the idea is that you're going to reach out in prayer and you're going to then listen in meditation. Let me get to the prayer thing. It really kind of, maybe because the meditation is the one that's kind of interesting. But looking at prayer, of course, prayer is all over the place throughout the whole Bible. As you can see here, it says it's 60 times in New Testament. But I looked at the word prayer, and you could take your pick because they're all the same. And we get the word you ask in prayer. Let me get down here. I scrolled up by itself. Prayer. It's taken, the various forms of the words. Now, some of them are rather unique in the Bible a couple of times, but the root word you can derive from the how it's applied in the context, whether it has in this case it says dative, feminine, singular, noun. I mean, there's Greek is way more complicated than English in terms of the tenses and whatnot. But taking from the word prayer by implication and oratory. In this place, you're talking. So, I think how come I don't have that? Did I lose that? I must have lost the page there. How about that? Prayer, place for... Oh, yeah. Also, I'm looking at the word, and it's coming up with a place for prayer. Prayer to God, a place for prayer used by the Jews, perhaps, where there is no synagogue. So you have this whole concept of coming to God in prayer. And I'd like to put in there talking, because to me, and this is where my thinking comes in, and, you could do what you want, is when you verbalize something, it becomes real. It's like, if I can use the analog with the quantum mechanics, you have the infinite waveform of possibilities. That's flowing around in your head. And when you talk it, you're narrowing it down into an actual item. Now, if you act on it, would be the final bringing into reality. So what I think I would recommend, I'm not saying God can't hear your thinking, because remember, look at it as a pipe or a phone wire that goes all the way back to God through you. But I think that the infrastructure, and this is the whole point of me talking here, is how do you formulate communication with God? Well, you're pondering it in your head. You go to God and you say something, and you lay it all out there, and you're verbalizing it. You're using your emotions in particular. You got to feel it. Let me get to this. Where did I go? Let me go back here. There, by implication, oratory. So you're putting it out there. You're talking, and I got some examples here of Psalms, and just a couple. It's just there's millions, so you could just pull a bunch out. But here in Psalm, you'll have presumably David was saying, "O Lord, how my adversaries have increased. Many things are rising against me." So he's coming to God, going, "Man, my enemies are around me," and so on. And then here's another one. "Answer you when I call, O God of righteousness. You have relieved me of my distress. Be gracious to me and hear my prayer." Hey, you've done things in the past. That's cool. I appreciate that. I acknowledge that. I got some stuff here. You see this kind of conversation that's coming out? I would imagine in this, he's writing it down, presumably. Somebody is. He's either saying it, somebody's writing it, or he's writing it down. So you have this prayer. I'm sharing information with God. I've thought about it. I've decided to say it out loud. I've committed it to the world. I'm bringing out this information, and you're talking in within. Now, I say God ultimately, but it goes through that chain. and you got your higher, you got to get past your fears and your biases. You have to sometimes get past your own knowledge because sometimes, it's too limited. And then you go into your spirit, which has its own imperfections. You get into your soul, which has got its own imperfections. And then you get back to God, which, of course, is perfect. So God is very relaxed in this. He doesn't push it. It's a very, remember that saying, they think God wasn't in the whirlwind, but it was in a still small voice. This is just how it is, So you present your information and you say it out loud. You maybe you have a place. You're going to, it's like when you go to somebody's house to talk to them, right? So maybe you have a prayer place. It's just, it's not legalistic. Obviously, you're driving on a car. I mean, I've prayed in a truck, and it's not like I got to go home to my prayer place. But you know what I'm saying? The more official you make it, the more, and it doesn't mean you can't be spontaneous. It doesn't mean, you can't just praise God and not ask for anything. I mean, that's all fine. But I'm trying to come up with the seriousness of it. You approach God with it. You share from the heart and the mind. And this is where I talked about the idea of the initial verse. My mouth will speak wisdom. The meditation of my heart will be understanding. You use your mouth to articulate, and you use your heart, your feelings. And I don't mean your feelings like, touchy-feely, whatever, but your emotional aspects of it is very powerful. You visualize what you're thinking about. You're feeling what you're thinking about, and you're saying what you're thinking about. That's your communication to God. The fervent righteous prayer of a man yieldeth much. That fervent righteous prayer, fervor, you're really putting it in there, and the righteousness is that you're not praying so that you can, beat your neighbor, in tennis next week. So you put this aspect of it, and then you end up having the meditation, which is the musing, open your mind to allow things, talk to God, kick it around. Hey, I don't know, maybe you should try this. I don't know, this guy said this, and I read this, and what do you, I don't know. And something might be this, and it might all of a sudden go like, bing, that's the one, and it'll be in your own way of doing it. It won't be, necessarily hear a bing, though that would make life a little easier. Yeah, here I like to see it in the New American Standard Bible. My mouth will speak wisdom, and my meditation heart will be understanding. You open your heart, you ponder it, you muse on it, and this is where the answers would come. Now, the answers take time. I just told you, I worked all weekend on this turntable, right? And just before I got on the show, bing, it's done. Just like that. Why did it take time? Was it a lesson? Presumably, if it wasn't, it will be taken as one. And, why couldn't it be fixed in a minute? Why didn't it, forget it. It's done, and so on. So you have these aspect of it. So you tend to it carefully. When you meditate, it's carefully. It's not casually. It's not like, you sit down, you really get into it. That's why people have routines. There's certain music you like people visualize by a lake or something. You do this whole deal because your mind is going to get involved and go like, this is boring. Either the mind is going to just whine and not going to listen. It just wants it, boom, to pop up and be there. So you put this careful practice into listening. You get in this mood, this space. It's both serious, it's intimate. Rather than the word serious, let's say intimate. This is why the problem with promiscuity is terrible, because you're taking something that's very precious and intimate and unique and just casually throwing it around. And you don't want to do this. You don't want to have your talks with God to be you just moaning. But you're coming to share. It's like, just imagine if you book time with someone who is an advisor on a problem, and you went to them and you're presenting the problem with them. You're letting them know how important it is, and we got to find an answer. And here's what I've come up with so far, and and then you listen to his commentary. He goes over what you did. Well, this is a good idea here, but if you move this over here, do that there, blah, blah, blah. This is how you talk to God in prayer and meditation. Now, when you put the word fasting in there, that is a good thing, and perhaps I could have thrown that in for good measure. It's just popping in my head now. But in fasting, what you're doing, a couple things, is you're cleansing out yourself. You're literally eating your own lesser bad cells and dead cells or something like that. You're cleaning yourself out. You're not being influenced chemically by food, drink, or what have you. You have your sign. I mean, people who have fasted, I've done this, your clarity. You get clearness of mind. You get clearness of heart. And so if you want to toss fasting, prayer, and fasting, and the meditation in there, put those three together to the big three, that would be great. Let me just take a second here of your time. I got duplicate tab. Okay, good. Let me look up fasting real quick, real time, and just see if I got a clue from. Let me go into the New Testament here. Yeah, Jesus was. A lot of people were fasting, and they were walking around going, "Oh, I'm fasting." And they were being, so that Jesus talking about, so that your fasting will be not by noticed by men, and the Father who sees what's done in secret will reward you. See, there's my thing about praying. I mean, there's nothing wrong with praying together in groups and open. That's fine. I mean, really, it's totally fine. Oh, I'm not going to get weird on nothing. Let me just duplicate tab. Let me move this over. All right, and let me put this verse in. Well, you could guys see real time, I guess, if you're not offended by it too. No, here it is, up here. Paste. 18. All right, you're fasting. Let's look at it. To fast, abstain from food, from necessist. Oh, it's from the word. To abstain from food. Let me look up the. Abstain from food. Pretty simple. There's other terms when it's been used to deny yourself and fast. I'm looking here. You guys can see too. It should be in HD, or at least, yeah. So it's just basically fasting, abstaining from food. So, by abstaining from food, you're going to have this chemical reaction in your body, biochemical state of mind. You'll be clear, focused, the hunger gnawing at you a lot of times, depending on how my hunger is more mental than it is physical. I mean, I fasted for 18 days once using Master Cleanse, which is just a couple of teaspoons of lemon juice, a little of cayenne, and then a teaspoon of organic maple syrup, grade B. So it's complex carbs in there, along with glucose for your brain. It's very low calories. It's only a couple hundred calories a day. But the point was to fast and cleanse, and it worked out great. And I just knew when to stop. My body was like, time to start doing it again. And I learned a lot from it. I mean, I got a whole load of problems now. It's like I look back and I go, like, did I really learn from it? But I digress. So you put those two together with the fast, which was the biochemical, the meditation, which would be more of the mental, psychological, spiritual, and then the prayer, which is the giving it forth, saying your piece to God. Preparing yourself bodily would be, I guess, the fasting, or making time so they're not going to interrupt it, and all those things. If you want to get esoteric a little bit and say you're fasting from the internet or TV, you're putting away those things which clutter your mind so you can focus better, and you'll get better answers. When I mean better answers, it doesn't mean you'll like them. They will be the right ones, effectual. In fact, I remember, I'll look up that verse, the righteous fervent prayer, or the fervent prayer. They availeth much. Let me take a little peek here, a bunch of chat room stuff, and now that I got a break in the action. Yeah, because one of the things we did with the Prescience was talking about the angels don't know, even the Son doesn't know, but only the Father alone only, because on that talk, I talked about this timeline, your personal timeline to the future. Only God knows that timeline, because he's both at the end and the beginning and in the middle of it. Yeah, he's along with it. He's the only one. No one else can do that by design, because it's your timeline. I mean, it's your thing. And so when you actually get down and look at this type of a thing, you're working over your timeline with God. What's this? Sorry, where's the Lord? I had the Lord's Prayer. I don't know, did I lose it? I had the Lord's Prayer here. Yeah, see, I did lose it. I knew I had another thing here. I had the Lord's Prayer up here purposely. And, let me, isn't that funny? It got closed on me. Let me look up, Our Father. That's a pretty good way to find the Lord's Prayer, because I was going to talk about that too. Thank you for bringing that up, because it slipped past. Somehow that closed. I clicked on it and, screwed us up. New Testament. When you give to the poor, blah, blah, blah. Here it is. And you can see it's red. I was at Matthew 6:9 is where I was at, and I expanded it to 14. So it got closed somehow. Thanks for bringing it up. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. If you look at the structure of this, you have the acknowledgement of God. And the term heaven, the Hebrew word turned into the Greek, has to do like sky. So I would say that what this word is actually mean, our God, who was my Father, who is above me, above, at the end of the phone line, as I'm putting it, or the rope. You're acknowledging hallowed be in the name. And then your kingdom come is like you're looking at your will done. You're saying like, I got you. Your plan is good. We know your plan is perfect. I want your structure on earth. I want what you say is best to happen, because I trust it. It's the best thing that can happen. It takes everything in consideration, me and everybody else. Whatever God's will is for your life, his suggestion, I would even put it, because we cannot listen. It's perfect. So you're saying like, yeah, God, our Father who is above me, holy is your name, great is your name. Bring on your situation. Bring on your structure. Your will be done on earth. Well, I want it to be done on earth as it is in heaven already. His structure in heaven is already good. I want it. And then here's the asking part. Give us this day our daily bread. That's it. There's the asking. But what a great line that is, because give us this day our daily bread. Meet our needs. Because God knows exactly what we need when we're needing. You're praying, meet our needs. Now, I would say that this is a format that he's saying, kind of a generic format. And in the slot, when it says, give us our day our daily bread, this is where you would talk about what you see and what your need. So the first part is kind of like, hey, hey, God, not the guy next door. I love you. This is great. I know you got great advice. I want to follow it. I wish everything was down here, was already taken care of, blah, blah, blah. I want to take your advice and put it into the real world. Here's the question, right? And then it's very clever. Jesus is teaching, I think, in here as well, is forgive us our debtors as we forgive those who are debtor. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. So it's like, yeah, I'm sorry for what I've done, and you're asking to be sorry as I forgive. That's pretty strong stuff. Because if you don't forgive people, God, you're saying to God, yeah, would you please forgive me? But I ain't forgiving him over there. Good stuff. Jesus is going like, oh, thanks. James thinks it's good stuff. Oh, whew, I was a little worried about that for a minute. Lead us not in temptation, but deliver us from evil. Now, that's pretty cool. Lead us not in temptation is you don't want to have, you're asking God, I want to solve the problem. Don't lead me to be tested. Like, look, I don't want to be tested. I want to have the solution and deliver us from evil. You know, it's a good thing. It's not that, oh, God was going to go, well, I was going to tempt him today, but no, all right, you know. There's a lot of theology in here. It's a structure and it's a theology. So, interesting enough, for thy is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever, amen. One of the reasons why I like a lot of these, like the NSV, is this clause is not found in early manuscripts. When they've come up with earlier manuscripts, this is missing. So some scribe along the way probably put this in. But for me, there's no harm done because, you know, for yours is the kingdom and power and the glory forever and ever. I mean, yeah, okay, cool. So what that scribe probably had some manuscripts that said it, some didn't, and he's like, hey, I'm not going to take this out. And he put it in there, but no harm done. And then Jesus goes on to test. If you forgive others for your transgressions, your Heavenly Father will also forgive you. You know, very important stuff. I mean, forgiving is all part of your own energy, too, because if you don't forgive and you're angry and non-forgiving and you're mad and you put that energy out into the creative force or in the world around here, you're bringing stuff on you. And so if you forgive people, you're in a state of forgiving yourself. It's more you forgiving yourself rather than God forgiving yourself, per se. And if you, excuse me, if you have this forgiving others and this aspect of looking at others and, okay, you know, that energy, as it goes out into the energy matrix in the world, you know, is around you creating stuff. So if you're worried about having enough money to pay for things and you got that worry, this is where the theory is like attracts like in this aspect. There, you know, the secret, quote unquote, is you put that out there, it comes there. Now I had to deal with this because I had a couple bad years with the truck and money, and I'm hurting. Things are turning around, making more this year, and hopefully I can get things back together again. But it worries me not. And I tell myself, well, don't worry about it. Not don't you trust God? I go, yeah, I know, but here's my deal: is I look out there and I see people who are just broken. You hear about the kids being raped and all this stuff happening, and I'm going like, what makes me special? It's like an anti-ego where it goes like, hey, we're in a dangerous planet here, and I want God to protect me, but I look at the other people and I go like, I don't know the story there. I don't know. I know there's a verse in Psalms that says, though the Lord may slay me, I'll praise his name. And I would put it in more modern terms, and though I may be accosted negatively, to death, it's still, I'm going to praise his name because God allows stuff to happen for the highest, best good. Sometimes people are sacrificed for a higher good, and they're compensated on the other side. And I dare you to find one who was going to complain about that, what they had sacrificed to what they had gotten. And but this is where I think it comes in. So that is in Jesus' prayer. You can see a structure, you can see teaching, and all I was actually saying, I guess, if I can add to this, is I'm coming up with a let's say a more modern, I don't know what to call, a more personal, modern interpretation of the mechanism. It doesn't go into the mechanism here. It's going into the attitude, and I'm trying to get into kind of like the metaphysical, psychometaphysical mechanism and how you can prepare yourself for a greater communication with God and more fruitful returns and answers. Again, it's going up the chain, right? So, God didn't tell me, hey, why don't you change the ground, lift the ground off and put it to the negative RCA? God didn't say that, but one of God's, again, there's the straw, the little string coming from God, through the soul, to the guy, and he's on the internet, and it's, and it just pops up in Google, right? And there it is. Now, part of it is because Google has heard me talk about hum and grounding and Techniques 1200 turntable, and that's a good part of Google. When they listen to that, and that's when they're not doing political bias stuff or programming or whatever, cultural programming. But then again, who knows? Again, God is, the hearts of the heart of the king is in God's hand, and he can sway it. And so, how it works out. So let me, all players individually unique. Yes, absolutely. Covers. Let me just read this. Our Father covers the essentials. Is on temptation. Yeah, you see the word debt. I mean, I can go into this if we want. There's different. I remember when I was a Lutheran. It was forgive us our. I think it was forgive us our trespasses, if I recall. And you forgive those who trespass against us, I believe is how we said it. But, whether you want to say debt or trespass, I mean, right now I'm trying to duplicate tab. We're going to look up this verse. I'll get into the Greek and see if there's anything significant. Get into Strong's numbers. All right. I don't know how. I pray have. Yeah, it's going to go one at a time. Let me get give us our daily bread. And forgive. To send forth in various applications, forgive us our debts. Debt, offense, sin from a fellow, something owed, something is due, a mortality, a fault. Let me get into Strong here. Yeah, debt, offense, sin. So you could see, forgive those who owe, is how we owe, what we transgressed, what we sinned, what we did. Forgive us as we do that for others. So, however it is, this would be, and that's why it depends how that's what's great about looking at other English translations is because unless you're a Hebrew or Greek scholar, which I am not, you're not going to have the nuances of the word because just like take the word. Hey, man, that's pretty cool. Or, that looks cool. Let's put it that way. That looks cool. No, is it that looks cold? That looks attractive? How would you translate that if you were in another language? Well, you would want to stay away from cold because it doesn't fit the idiom in that sentence. But if you don't have any other information, all you have is that looks cool. That's all you have, right? You have no other... you can't make it definitive. You can look at it and say, well, most of the time when the humans said this back then, this is what they meant, so it probably means attractive of some type, but it could have, a footnote could also mean called. You see, it's not to be scared about. It's not, that's one of the problems I had when I was in the deep, fundamental churches, is they're taking the hell out of the Bible. I went into it a couple weeks ago where there's actually two words for hell. Gehenna and Sheol, which would be the Hebrew, and now I can't think of the Greek. Hades, which is the place of the dead. So there's two aspects of it. One word in English, theology is built on English. Now you got a trouble. But it's not pleasant any way you look at it. So, oh, you mean you're not going to burn in a lake of fire for forever and ever and ever? Wait a minute. You're only going to burn for a while, or you're going to be in a very unpleasant state for a million years while you work. Well, that's cake. You see how in reality it's dumb, but that's why Jesus was against the Pharisees and the scribes. In fact, in the newer translation, NASB, which is in the 70s, so it's not exactly new anymore, but They translated scribes and lawyers because, Pharisees and lawyers, because the scribes were the ones who wrote stuff down and they're the ones who interpreted. So it's like a lawyer. You could see the thrust in there in looking up the word, that they're looking at the people who are using the word of God to wiggle it around like they do in law here. Yeah. God, just ask God plain. No mental gymnastics needed. Let him answer however and when he wants. Are you trying to force him to do what you want? That's magic, not prayer. Yeah. I don't think that question was directed at me. Am I trying to force? No. All I'm trying to come up with is as I see it, this is me. Okay, from reading these things and from pondering it, from musing on it, meditating on it, there is a mechanism, an ideal mechanism for prayer. But you can, just like you can sit down and, you can have a meeting with somebody and go over stuff, or you can call them on the phone. I need an answer now. Boom. You can communicate. But I'm trying to look at more of a systematic, planned, regular visits. When you have a problem, you want to get to this problem. You want to sit down and talk it over. That's kind of what I'm getting at here. Yeah, I don't think it was directed at me, but I'm just reiterating, just in case someone's listening. Who knows? Somebody might have had that thought. Oh, it's good you brought it up. So that the idea is that when you use these principles and you sit down and you talk with God and you lay it out, you verbalize it, you feel it out, you feel verbal. Feel it out with God. And set it out there. That's why a lot of times when you pray, you can pray and you're crying, because you're feeling this tugging and so on. But at the same time, like Jesus says, your will be done. So like if you have someone who's ill and he may be dying and you're praying for healing, you're also in there accepting. And if you look back at our years and years of doing the show, we've done a healing meditation. And oftentimes, probably every time, or at least most of them, I've said in there that, if it's if it's the highest best good, this person dies. We pray for it to be the best way for all those involved. And so on. And I've had my sister had dealt with people who had cystic fibrosis, and we had 2 people we prayed for. It's a prayer meditation. It's a prayer. It's a meditation. We visualize healing. We're using our powers of being what I call God with skin on, and sending this healing energy to the person. It's the mechanism that I have incorporated, found, think, feel that works for this type of thing. And we had these 2 people on there. Both were young girls who had cystic fibrosis. They had a transplant, and they were both hairy, looking like there might be a problem. And we had a meditation, and I talked to my sister the next week, and one all of a sudden took a turn for the better, and she got well, as well as you get with cystic fibrosis. He was able to marry her boyfriend, and they went on. I also found out that the lifespan of someone who gets a lung transplant with cystic fibrosis is a matter of years. Single digits, double your, so. But the other one, on the other hand, was all upset and nervous and mad and upset, and all of a sudden she just got calm, was happy, she accepted what will be, had peace, and she died. So which one of those prayers, meditations were answered? I'd say both were, because we're all going to die. If it was a question of we're not going to, we won't die unless something happens to us, that'd be one thing, but we're all going to die. It's just when and what could we learn and help other people and also discover, funds included, before that happens. And so when people get to the point where they're so full of drugs to keep the heart and the lungs and this and that, all the stuff going, their skin is falling off them because of they're like tissue, and they barely can't do anything. It's like, is that life? No, I'm not advocating euthanasia, not at all. The people can try and do what they want and keep as long as they want, but sometimes I think people hang on to life too long, and by hanging on too long, I remember a bit in Lord of the Rings, Aragorn was talking. It was like it wasn't in the official book. It's like in other printings, they put like a little addendum on. And when Aragorn was going to die, you know, his wife was I can't think of the name now. I could see her. An elf, not an elf. Is that right? Elf. Elvenry, yeah, elf. And she would have lived, you know, forever, barring death, right? And so she became a human, which means that she would die. But she has a longer life than him. And so when it came to his end of his life, he chose, you know, he said it was his part of his race to be able to choose when to die. Now, I'm not going to get into the suicide. They just lay down and die. It's like, it's in the book. This is what they did. This was their deal with God. And he said, what would you rather have me do? Fall from my throne unmanned and incompetent, you know, and being an idiot, you know, now forgetting all the other stuff. The point being is that at some point, being alive isn't worth being alive. And this is where we kind of let God make the decision. Now with medicine, we can extend things. And you know, our dog, for example, would have been dead. It had a huge prostate. He did an x-ray of it, and it was bigger than his bladder. And he did an operation where they castrated him, you know, fixed him, is the nice euphemism. That would cut off the testosterone, which is probably the cause of it. All males, when they have prostate problems, it's because testosterone, except with a human being, you don't really cut it off. You try to chemically alter the testosterone. And so, you know, we did this, and it was like, if it was going to be terrible, we have the ability to be able to put him to sleep, where you don't really do it with humans. But my point is when the life for the dog becomes wearisome, you know, struggle, why is the dog alive? Now, I think there's a human aspect to that. It's a higher aspect to that, and we can learn through suffering. We can still help and do things, so it's a different format. But the idea being is that sometimes I think people clean the life too long. I wonder where how did that go out of there from, I guess was you're praying to stay alive or whatever, be healed. And I had mentioned before in the series, a little thing I did on the will of God. God's will is the highest, best good for all involved. I mean, whether it be like the planet, the country, the locale, the family, the individual, all those people, depending upon what happens, he's got to juggle all that and come up with the highest, best good. That would be his will. And then the people are going to choose their ways to go, and then he's going to have to keep rejuggling. I mean, I use the thing that God is like playing chess with pieces that walk around the board, and he still has to allow them to do their thing, and it still works out at the end, because that's how great God's plan is. And you mentioned that in that particular study that the mechanism of the universe is the fixed thing that is the structure to it. Like, you know, like a planet coming to hit Earth or something would be would be set from the beginning. And whether God actually enters space-time, that's optional. People talk about Jesus returning now, and they're coming up with, in my opinion, a lot of legalistic reasons why now is the time, and they're going to Israel becoming a nation and all this stuff and on and on. And I'm thinking, like, from the day Jesus left, they were looking for him to return, right? So, they didn't know enough then, and we realize now, no. We don't know when Jesus is coming. You know, some people would say if, depending on your theology. And it's like, to me, it's like, what's that? I don't like doing this. Carpenter ants. Jesus, whether it comes or not, it's like we being human beings can turn things around on this planet and have and delay the end in a theological sense. And there is probably a fixed end, the sun exploding. There's something out there where it's immutable. But how things work on this planet up to that is up to us. So you literally have, I've read this with my own eyes, you have people who are happy and enjoying all the problems going on in the world because it proves Jesus is coming near for the rapture. So they're like, oh, there's wars, happy, They're all happy about this because, I mean, Jesus is coming to take us away. It's like, what do you think Jesus is going to do when if that happens? He'd be like, hey, remember Jesus talking to the Jews at the time, and many will come from the east and west to sit at the table with Abraham. Well, you will be thrust out. And this was they're looking at themselves being through genetics, being Abraham's offspring, that his grace counts for them. And Jesus is going, no, that's not how it works. So, beware a Christian who's sitting around looking for the destruction of the planet and the people around it so that they can get in there. It's like many will come who aren't conventional Christians and beat the table with Jesus while you, the so-called real Christian, are thrust out. I mean, this is the warning I take. It's like, whoa, I'm not sitting there saying it to anybody in particular. I'm saying it to myself, going like, yeah, But I'm kind of, having gone through the conventional Christian various churches. I went from United Church of Christ to Lutheran to Baptist, fundamental Baptist at that. Went in through, kind of studied the New Age stuff, and circled right back down to me studying the Bible and ultimately concentrating on the red letters. And that's how I've come to that with this process I just told you about, in pondering and thinking about things and seeing, like reading a Bible verse and seeing, well, I got to check that word out, and looking at this stuff. Oh, hey, that's interesting, and so on. So that's why I learned about the eternity by doing through that, eons of eons. I learned about hell, all the various aspects of hell and what they could be. In fact, I've even come up with my own personal theology of what someone who would be going into the hellfire would actually be, because I think a lot of this stuff is meant, because it's like, in fact, almost all of the theology that they say, the heaven is this long, it's got this kind of jeweled streets and all that. These are all metaphors to people who are describing something that's really fantastic. And if we were to have this vision, this is my interpretation, if we have the same vision now, we'd be describing it in our terms, because we cannot even comprehend what the reality of it is. It's going to be awesome, but it's awesome beyond our ability to even describe. In fact, I maintain that when we die, this is my personal theology, is that when we die, it's a process of becoming more, because it's not different, scary different. It's different, awesome different. It'd be like if you think this is so base, but hey, try this, it tastes good. And you go, wow, it tastes great. You were expecting okay, or maybe even thinking might not be okay. And it was like, oh, better than I thought. Well, times, whatever. And so this is why I look at this and say, rather than come up with Bible studies that talk about setting times, places, dates, things, we're going to sit with crowns around things. These are all, if it happens that way, fine. I'm not complaining. But to concentrate on coming up with the structure like that of heaven while we're alive on earth, when what we do on earth greatly influences the mode of moving through and up in the afterlife, it's wasting time. It's wasting. It's like talking about playing baseball instead of doing it. And you know what? And I've talked about recording music for decades now, and I haven't. And I'm racing now at the end. There's my own problem. But my problem was I didn't think I was worth putting that time in. There was always somebody else or something else to do. And then I'm tired and lazy and, throw that all on top too. So anyway, I hope I'm kind of rambling on here over the top, and I'm hoping that this has been some benefit here. Let me look at the chat room one more time before I. Yeah, God knows what we're going to ask, even when He asks you. But and that's true. But we can't just. God wants us to talk about it. God wants to develop a one-on-one relationship with us, and why it's difficult, and why there's temptations now, and why there's evil in the world now. I mean, you can come up with all kinds of guesses and answers or whatever. It doesn't matter. It is what it is. And Jesus, in particular, came up with methodology how to grow a better connection with God by doing good things, even though you don't like doing them, but you're doing them because you should do them. Even just doing them starts that subtle process. So anyway, if you happen to have questions, like I've been just popping this stuff's been coming. If you have questions about certain principles or certain even Bible verses, or, hey, how come the Catholics think this and the Lutherans think that and the Baptists think this or whatever, I've looked into a bunch of those for my own personal understanding, and I've come up with an understanding of why they've made their decisions, and I've made a choice on why I choose what I choose. So, Holy Communion or baptism would be two of the things that fit that specific thing I just threw out there without thinking about it. But if you do have questions on this, again, I'm not saying I'm a prophet here with absolute answers, but I think they're pretty good. They kind of fit in that lack of contradiction. They fit in there. They work. They're praising of God. They don't bring down God, and they don't elevate man, though they do accurately put humans both in a special and in a disadvantaged position, and we have to work that all out. And so that would be, the whole point of me doing this. I'd mentioned Less Visible. Actually, I didn't mention him in the beginning, but Less Visible, I haven't heard from. His blogs still have been updated. I presume he is still recuperating, and somebody will let me know. And most likely you could check his blog that he'll be talking about when he's on, and so it'll come out. So that way you can find out about him. I do have some things planned in the works, and we'll just get to that when the time comes. I'm going to say that's it. Is there nothing new down there? So, all right. Then we will see you again next week or whatever, and I will. I'm going to be working on some more offline stuff that I'll put up, and we will do that. Kind of hanging in here. Anything? All right. Then I got an arrow pointing down here. What does this mean? Oh, I guess there actually was. There are some questions here. Well, let me see. Hold on. Oh, I lost a lot of it. Hold on. Let me look. We talked about how they lost their keys. Yeah, you found them in there. I believe this. You can watch this when you watch the video. I think the chat goes along with it, if I'm correct. And so people who've read stuff that I have written stuff that I haven't talked about. What about the Earth? Yeah, see the new heaven, new earth. If I think I looked into that, and I'm doing this from memory, so forgive me, but it was the word "new" was the key word. That the way I would put it, this is my theological aspect of it, is that when the earth has fallen, and that's a whole discussion of why that even happened and what it is. What we're happening here, we have psychopaths here and we have all this stuff going on, right? This is not the way it's supposed to be, but it's the way it was chosen by people involved in it. Whether you want to blame Adam and Eve literally or figuratively, or choices along the way. But as I look at it, and if you want to go look into my vision I had, the only vision I've ever had, and it took me a while, but I decided to share it. The way I look at it is God is going to revitalize the earth to where the inhabitants, the critters, and the people, they would be healed to where they should be if it wasn't for, we'll use the word, the sin. And so what I saw in that vision was, you can listen to it for the whole detail, was that people were given a choice, an honest, open, like the veil was pulled back. and you saw what it was to be you healed in God through Christ as human as it's supposed to be, and you had an open choice, you had an informed choice. Right now, we're being bombarded with lies, and so at one point, the kind of time comes when people will have this choice. They will see what it is to be God of love and all that, and the vast majority of those people chose for this healing, and they were healed. And the few people that weren't were so embraced and loved in the evil that it was so difficult for them. It was scary because it was so foreign that they wanted to stay where they were. And those people went on to continue living in a place where they could be amongst themselves and they wouldn't have sheep to shear. Well, this is the kind of aspect. So when you say new heaven, new earth, I'm kind of looking at that is the area will be recreated to what it's ideally should be. And that word new, which I could look up now, I'd rather just not. I do have to get the ball rolling here for I'm going to work tomorrow, but that was the key for me. It was and so that's what I'm now. Again, it could be that even what I'm saying could be a metaphor for the real event. So, and for those alive, see, I think for those alive when it happens, they have they can actually be alive and continue on to live into this new heaven, new earth scenario, which will be a wonderful thing. You're alive and healed and made like you're supposed to be as God intended, both you personally in your own personalness and then in the whole infrastructure of the world. And that would be a good thing. So, like it's a good reason to stay alive as long as you can. In case it does happen, you're going to be there. Talk about a front row seat, prime seat, rare event in throughout eternity. Is probably rare when God enters space-time and goes, all right, we're cleaning this all up, and I'm going to honor free will, and I'm going to open the window and give you a taste. This is what it is. No tricks. You want in or not? No matter when. And I used the verse that Jesus said is that when he had people work in the field, he gave them the wage. And the people who started earlier in the day went, hey, wait a minute. How come they getting paid the same as we are? And he said, hey, we agreed for that, and it's mine to pay whoever wants. And that's the kind of mercy is those who are first will be last, last will be first. So I wouldn't begrudge someone who's lived an evil life and they were confronted with the living God through, in my vision, it was through Jesus. But it might have been through more angels that were coming. I mean, he was like leading the pack. And if they were confronted with, hey, here's like limited time only, limited time offer. We're going to do it all here. You want in? And they say, yeah, I'm not going to go like, wait a minute. I've been a Christian for years. I'm going to be like, cool. So I got no problem with that. So, that's kind of when I'm looking at the new age, new heaven and new earth. And, my personal belief and philosophy is that it's possible that it could be, near us. I mean, it might be within our lifetimes. I mean, I'm 61. Maybe I won't see it. Maybe I will. Maybe things will turn around here, and God will give us some time. Because remember, when in Revelation, came to Jesus and said, "Hey, how long are you going to let this go on here? All this persecuting and so on." And he said, "Here, take a robe that's been washed clean, and go relax. The time of the Gentiles isn't over." And so that way, if this does get pushed ahead to another time, then God has seen merit and value to continue the system as it is, though broken, for a new, some more harvesting of people. Being alive on this planet at this time allows people to do a lot of things that you can't do in a non-corporeal physical body like in heaven. This is my personal view, theological view. So that God looks at this as an opportunity for a lot of growth in people. Excuse me, I'm sorry about all that. But this is where This is why it's not a bad thing in the eyes of God, in that the bigger picture, people have gone through problems and people have made decisions and made mistakes and changed or what have you. All that is valuable in the growth. You know, what? This is why I wonder if the devil or whatever is like, come on, shut up, leave him alone. You know, I don't know. You know, but this is how I kind of look at it. So that, in other words, if things continue, that means God still sees value in working in the system. And at some point, God's going to go like, all right, we're done. It's enough. There's no more positive value out of the negative. We're done. And this is when I think you have this, quote, amnesty, the amnesty of all amnesties. And yet people will say, in fact, there's biblical verses that talk about people crying for the mountains to fall on them. Because it's like they don't want to have nothing to do with this. And it blows my mind. I would love for it to happen. So, anyway, I think that, let me look at that. Yeah, somebody mentioned Fukushima. I thought about that. People were, scientists or, people were talking about how there could be a large number of the fish could be killed in the sea from it. I'm thinking, wow, Fukushima. Let me do a little Bible stuff here. Fukushima, they talk about wormwood, a star from the sky falling to earth, and it's called wormwood, right? And then they thought Chernobyl might have been it because the nickname for Chernobyl was wormwood, though it probably might have been biblically in its where they got it from. But if you think about it, the star is fusion. The star's energy is fusion. That's the God-made way to create energy. The man-made way to create energy is fission. You're basically breaking apart an atom rather than combining atoms together. You're breaking apart a molecule, I should say, rather than combining an atom. Combining atoms. And so the man-made version, of course, being inferior and full of pollution, so the star falls to the earth, and that is Fukushima, the man-made star, if you will. It fell to the earth, all right, and it broke open and is contaminating everything. So, I thought there was a little bit of I wouldn't get legalistic on that. To me, it's like kind of poetic rather than prophetic, but it was kind of interesting. And then with all the hate that's going along with Trump and his cohorts, I was always wondered about how the witnesses, why would they be hated so bad? They'd be allowed to lie in the street, dead, and gifts would be given. It's like, I'm starting to understand the possibilities here with the way people are going nuts over Trump. Anyway, I think we'll leave it there because I got to get the ball rolling here. I have to work tomorrow. So God bless you all, and thanks for coming by for all the live folks. And those listening delayed, that's cool too. And yeah, remember the opening song was wonderful off the album. Let me go back to the Circle View is the band, and it is Greater Good. That's their album, and that's Lance Ayres. I met him years ago in Chicago, and he gave me a CD. He burned of the songs he recorded in his house. And it had Wonderful was on there, but then they actually got together and redid the album in the studio. I thought the original was great. So that's that. Remember them. Go visit them on their Facebook. You can look up the Circle View on Facebook and find them, and then you can find anything else about them. So that is that. So we will see you again next week. God bless. Take care. Remember, email me, make comments if you'd like something, because when people ask me questions, and I got a joke my daughter had told when they were young. They were in the grammar school, or maybe they were in high school. They were in high school, and the neighbor asked me to explain something. He goes, "Could you explain this to me?" My daughter went, "Uh-oh." He asked him to explain. And there was this look like, you don't know what you're getting into. And so I like to get into stuff with questions personally, but these things come out as they come, and I hope they could be of value to somebody along the way. Oh, there we go. Let me hit the magic end button, and we'll see you next time.